So as soon as I get, oh, there we go. So we're now being live streamed. Welcome members of the public, welcome members of committee here, and members of council, and all of our staff and our audit team to this audit committee meeting on Tuesday, November 9th. I do have to read the public notices that due to the efforts to contain the spread of COVID-19 and to protect all individuals, city facilities will not be open to the public to attend council and committee meetings until further notice. The public can observe meetings of council and committees by viewing the live stream of the open session part of these meetings, which can be accessed on the city's website. So the public may submit written correspondence regarding agenda matters by email to clerks@richmondhill.ca, and written correspondence must be submitted by 12 p.m. the day before the meeting. The public may also appear as electronic delegation by video conference or by telephone. And again, applications must be submitted 12 p.m. the day before the meeting by email to clerks@richmondhill.ca. So with that, and I just want to make an announcement to clear things up because some were confused. Council has voted as a majority to adopt the reading of a land acknowledgement at the beginning of all our council and committee meetings, but we don't do so until tomorrow, and when we pass the confirmatory bylaw. So until that confirmatory bylaw is passed, I'm not directed or authorized by council to do so, and I'm looking forward to starting meetings that way. Welcome, Councillor Munch and Councillor Silovitz, Councillor Chan. So can I get a motion to adopt the agenda? And I really have to rely on you, Councillor Chan, for moving motions at this point. Okay, very good. So all in favor?
Aye.
That's a unanimous vote there. Okay. So we have an agenda. Any disclosure of pecuniary interest, the general nature thereof? I see none. We don't have any delegations. We move right into our scheduled business. Item 4.1 is a report from Grant Thornton LLP dated November 9th regarding the communication of the audit strategy for the year ended December 31st, 2021, and a presentation by Melanie Dugard, the principal from Grant Thornton LLP. So Ms. Dugard, are you with us? There you are. Okay, go ahead.
Great, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. So this is our opportunity to present our planning document for the 2021 audit of the city. And this document is fairly consistent with ones you've seen in the past, but I do want to just highlight a few items and speak to just a few matters in the document itself. I'm sure you've all had a chance to read it. So our overall strategy for this year's audit is quite consistent with prior years. Our significant areas of focus are unchanged, as there's been no real changes in the overall operations, obviously, of the city. So we've highlighted a number of areas that we'll be spending the bulk of our time on as we work through the audit and some of the procedures that we will be doing. We've also included information about our team timing and communications. So you have myself, Alison Frizzell, who's also here at this meeting. We have been part of the team for the last number of years, and Gumarin has been as well a part of the overall audit team. So he's sort of stepping up a little bit, and he's going to be managing the audit team for this year's audit. And then we have Steve Selevko, who'll be doing the senioring for this year. In terms of changes that are coming, so there are some accounting standards changes that will be coming in the next couple of years. So we have met with management to discuss some of those. So there's a new revenue standard, financial instrument standard, and asset retirement obligation standard. And we've included some information in the document for your information, but essentially there will be some changes that will come, some disclosure changes mainly for some of these, but the asset retirement obligation standard requires that the city evaluate existing assets like buildings to see if there may be potential costs that have to be incurred if you're either going to retire the asset or sell it at some point, and then determine if any potential liability needs to be recorded. So there's 2 years to go to be able to determine those items, and management's already started working through that, but we've included information in the document about those standards in case you're interested. And then there's always the one item in our report that we turn back to the committee and ask the question of. So as we work through the audit, we do obviously meet with management to talk about instances of potential non-compliance with laws and regulations and fraud, but we are required to ask the committee if you are aware of any such items as well. So through you, Mr. Chair, if I can ask the committee if you're aware of any instances of fraud or non-compliance with laws and regulations that we should be aware of from an audit perspective.
Not at this time, Ms. Dugard. Any other members of committee?
No.
Nothing to forward. No.
Okay, so with that, that's really the conclusion of me speaking to the report, but I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody has.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm sure Council may have questions. Just seeing if we're going to go to other presentations first, or no, we'll deal with Mr. Dugard's presentation there. So anyone have questions? Any councillors in attendance or committee members have questions?
Yeah.
Councillor Munch? Yeah.
Hey, good day. Good to see everybody. Happy Remembrance Day. The only question I have, good seeing you. Welcome to Zoom, Mr. Dugard. The question I ask is, with our new protocol with COVID working from home, I know you followed a standard protocol as to how things were looked at, but was there any extra review of our processes and approval areas and discussions and topics and mannerisms and policies and procedures that were brought to light because of this new way that we do things?
Ms. Dugard?
Yes, sorry, I'm a little slow on the unmute button. So to answer your question, so we every year when we're going through our audit planning, we do update our understanding of key areas of policies and procedures. So there are several areas that we would have taken a look at and reviewed with management to determine if there were any changes in those policies and procedures as a result of the pandemic. So because there was a change in how things may be being done, we did update our understanding with respect to those policies and procedures. And then as we work through our testing during year end, when we do the actual field work, we'll note if there's been any, as we're testing expenses, for example, if there's been any deviations from those policies and procedures, we'll note it then.
So I guess the one of the things come to mind, I may be premature if I am, we'll wait for this question, but generally speaking, anything at less than $100,000 doesn't be brought forward to council. Or items under $100,000 may not be brought to council. And now that we've got a little bit more fragmentation of a centralization model, is that a concern or the policy going forward, given that now there's not as much perhaps group discussions and engagement back and forth? Was that looked at all?
When we do our year-end testing for the audit, that's when we take a look at, we do some testing of various levels of purchases to determine if they're in compliance with your existing bylaw. So if there's been a change with respect to authorization levels for purchases, if $100,000 is the new threshold, or if there's a change there, when we do our testing at year-end, we'll be taking a look at compliance with those new measures.
Is there any study on trending? So say, for example, the arranging, and I don't know if you do that, but let's say, for example, we already have our 3 phases as to scale. I'm wondering that if someone says, okay, our X department was spending historically between $70,000 and $90,000 or $30,000 and $50,000, and was that benchmarking increasing? Because there's nothing to council, that is something where I would say to you that we have to rely on process, and we don't really get any feedback. So from an audit perspective, I'm wondering, is that trending, or is there a algorithm in there to bring an awareness that should things be trending upwards or particular areas or anything like that being done on any scale?
In terms of the trending or benchmarking with respect to the levels of what's going through the purchasing policy, that would be outside the scope of the audits. That's not something we would look at. We would do any testing on a statistical basis. So I can't speak to any potential trends that come from a statistical sample.
Okay, fair enough. Those are my questions. It's good seeing you.
Okay, thanks for that, Councillor Munch. Okay, any other questions? I don't see any. So Councillor Chan, can I ask you for a motion to receive the report? Thanks, Councillor Chan. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so that carries. Thanks, Ms. Dugard. Thanks for that presentation. The next item is 4.2, the internal audit outstanding recommendations. So we have a staff report here with outstanding recommendations, and the recommendation is that they be received. Do we have someone from staff who wants to speak to this, or we're just going to receive it? Is there any member of committee or council members in attendance have questions? Councillor Chan, you want to move it?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'd like to move it for receiving it, but also I have a question through you to staff. So it was great to see in the report that 98% of the recommendation, which are, by the way, 58 of them, that are provided by the internal auditor. So, so right now we're still looking at 2%, and I do understand the management already preparing for response, particularly on the IT system. And I'm not going to go into it at this point in time, but Councilor Munch brought up a good point that particularly during the pandemic, the digital services is more than ever needed, not only Richmond Hill, for all kinds of public, even private sector delivery of services. So in that front, I look forward to future report back from staff. But specifically, my question is relating to that: what would be the next particular project internal audit looking at? And I think it was mentioned about the fleet. So through you, Mr. Chair, I like to ask the staff, to the extent that you can share, what is the kind of very general scope of what this particular internal audit, if the city is fleet? Are we talking about the fuel efficiency, other operational areas that could be improved upon? Through you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I see Ms. Dempster's come on. Go ahead, Ms. Dempster.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To the councillor, we haven't determined the exact scope of the audit at this time. We're still in discussions, but it would be process related, policy related, ensuring compliance from that aspect. But the exact parameters, we're still in discussions with the internal audit team on what the scope should be and what is reasonable to expect from one audit from a time frame. So that should be decided in the next few weeks. We are meeting with them this month to determine the 2022 audit plans, but we will have that information. We can bring that forward at a future date.
Thank you for that. And in fact, if I understand it correctly, our, I guess, current agreement with the York region acting as the internal audit is expiring. Am I correct? Through you, Mr. Chair.
Through you, Mr. Chair, you are correct. We're in the process of negotiating a future 3-year term with internal audit.
Right. So if that's the case, in the spirit of being, openness, competitiveness, and so on, would there any thought to be given that to maybe having quote unquote a kind of competitive procurement of this service? Through you, Mr. Chair.
Dempster?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's certainly an option. However, we have chosen not to have an internal audit function internally or to extend this out to the private sector. We felt that acquiring York Region services, as others in York Region do as well, is the least cost option for us, and it works for us. And they're also very adaptable to our situation and our needs. For example, with COVID, we were able to cancel some of the planned audits for financial savings. When you have an external contract with an external party, that's not always feasible.
Okay, thank you. Well, I guess from my end is not just a comfortability, but certainly the degree of confidence that the staff would have, and also with the competence of these internal auditors. So I have no further question. As I mentioned, Mr. Chair, I'm happy to move for receipt of this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chan. Okay, so I don't see any other questions.
Yep, if I may, sorry.
Councillor Munch, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, guys. So further to Councillor Chan's discussion there, I just want to reiterate my concern about continuity. It's really important that for me, that we have a consistency, as I mentioned earlier, that when you have someone who is aware of the culture and of the background, it actually adds value to learn and to look for certain algorithms, which is what I like. I also do believe with Councillor Chan that we need to make sure that those services that we are getting, that we have our preferred options internally, that they are competitive with the market, and that we're not, getting into a certain situation where it's a little bit too of a nice relationship. And then third of all, is I do believe every so often there does need to be an adjustment to adjust, vibrancy. So all those three things I would hope would be done as a matter of course. So how long has this current internal, I think I have a memory when they were first hired, but how long are the terms? Are they 3-year terms? And this was the first 3-year term, is that correct?
Ms. Dempster?
I believe we're finishing up a 3-year term, but I'm not aware. As you know, I joined the city in 2017. I'm not aware if there was a term previous to this. I'd have to defer to Lise Conde. She would be aware of that information.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, all I'm saying is I think they're just, as long as you keep that in mind as you're going forward, because we just don't want to have we go through a regular process, standard protocol going through it. We actually want to have people who are keeping an ad hoc relationship with some level of competency and knowledge and culture awareness that are going to bring a responsible approach for us as an independent third party to raise awareness to how things are going. And new companies and even though they have experience, it's always a learning curve going into any organization for the first time. So that would be my little, not just simply a cost, but more of a productivity, performance, and competitiveness model. So that's my comments. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Munch. So with that, I'm gonna call the vote on the motion by Councillor Chan to receive the staff report. All in favor?
All right.
Okay, any opposed? That carries. Okay, we move to item 4.3 is our capital budget financial monitoring policy. And we have a presentation by Gigi Lee, our manager of fiscal planning and strategy. Ms. Lee, are you on? I see you there. Can you turn your screen on and unmute yourself? Tell us about our capital budget financial monitoring policy.
Great. Thank you. Good afternoon.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I'll be presenting item 4.3, the capital budget financial monitoring policy. Next slide, please. As we all know, a considerable effort is expended in assessing the capital projects that are included in the capital budget and presented to Budget Committee and Council on an annual basis. Sorry?
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Okay. Sorry. However, throughout the year, there may be a need to commence or otherwise commit to a project that was not anticipated during the capital budget process, or that additional funds may be needed for an existing project. Current city financial bylaws that relate to capital budgets provide guidelines on capital purchase amendments within approved budgets. In the interest of maximizing operational efficiency and addressing time-sensitive opportunities that may come up during the year, it was recommended as part of the 2021 capital budget lean review that an in-year capital process and delegated authority be established to ensure transparency, operating efficiency, and flexibility, and also to have the controls and reporting mechanisms in place. Next slide, please. Municipal benchmarking was completed and best practices were considered. Staff surveyed neighboring municipalities such as Markham, Vaughan, and Aurora, along with other municipalities in other regions such as Durham, Toronto, Waterloo, and Niagara. In-year capital and funding require governance, and that's what we saw throughout our benchmarking exercise. Almost all municipalities surveyed have council-approved policies or guidelines to outline the process, the thresholds and authorizations, as well as documentation and reporting. This draft policy is a result of the recommendation of the lean review, as well as staff capital budget committee. It's designed to work in conjunction with other city policies and bylaws. Next slide, please. The capital budget financial monitoring policy provides the framework for requesting, authorizing, monitoring, and reporting in-year capital budget for two types of requests. First one being unplanned situations where no budget was previously established or approved. You see on this slide some of the examples of what these projects may be. Second one being existing projects where an increase in budget is needed. I'll provide more details on the two types of requests on the next couple of slides. Next slide, please. Staff have identified three types of unplanned situations with no prior budget approved. First one is grant or third-party funded projects. At times, grants and third-party funding become available after the capital budget approval. And in most cases, grant applications are time-sensitive and come with very tight timelines. This policy will allow staff to start and submit grant and third-party funding applications in a timely manner while receiving approvals in order to secure those funds. The policy sets out that the treasurer will have authority for projects that are 100% funded, or that if the city share is under 500,000. In these situations, they will be documented and reported out as part of the capital project financial status report. Where the city share is greater than 500,000, a dedicated staff report will be provided to council. Current city financial bylaws provide exception for emergency projects. These will continue to be documented and reported as part of the capital project financial status report, as you can see in the table. New and time-sensitive projects arise mid-year. The policy recommends that these may be undertaken, provided that the applicable approvals are obtained prior to commitment. As you can see in this table, the senior leadership team will have delegated authority of up to $100,000. It'll be reported out in the capital status report. All projects exceeding 100,000 will be submitted to council for approval. The thresholds that are mentioned here are in line with the limits in the financial control bylaw. Next slide, please. As we know, the life of capital projects may span from 1 to several years, and sometimes requirements, conditions, and estimates may change, resulting in the need to increase budget. In having this delegated authority, it maximizes operational efficiency and reduces project delays. As you can see in this table, there are various thresholds and approvals depending on the percentage or the amount that's needed. Again, the reporting will be via the capital project financial status report of up to $250,000. Any amount greater than $250,000 will require council approval ahead of time. Next slide. All in-year capital requests will only be approved by senior leadership team and the treasurer, and will continue to be reported out to council by financial services on an annual basis as part of the capital project financial status report. Next slide. The recommendation is for the capital budget financial monitoring policy to be approved, and that concludes my presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Lee. Any questions for the presenter on this?
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead, Councillor Munch. I think
Thank you.
we can
My
hear you.
question-
Your video might be frozen. We can hear you.
I'm sorry about that.
It's okay.
So the question I ask is, what is the definition of a time-sensitive project?
Ms. Lee, can you elaborate on what constitutes time sensitive?
Yes, so the way we define time sensitive is, let's say, going back to the examples of a grant application, where typically the turnaround to have an application submitted, it's within several weeks. So we want to make sure that we have this policy in place so that we're able to go ahead and submit that application within that very tight timeline. So typically several weeks. So another example would be where a project has a time sensitive or more emergency in nature that cannot wait until the next cycle of the capital budget.
The concern I have with that is that there's not enough of a prioritization as it relates to the expectation of the public. And if we're working a vacuum and say, okay, we have a project, where are they? And I can give numerous examples in my area that aren't on the radar of our capital 5-year project, but are a massive safety concern. And it's not until a liability, and I haven't seen that in my tenure ever in 7 years here as council, when we have a liability concern and that has become part of a major project. I know that some of the grants are very specific to what that grant application thoughts are from another level of government often. But that's where we have, I would prefer, if we have time, and it appears to me that based on your answer that we have time, I'd rather see more special council meetings, more up to date on these applications, because we just ran into a situation on a time sensitive grant situation, and there was an arbitrary choice made, and there really wasn't a engagement. And some of the people, like the residents, for example, businesses are saying, are you kidding me? What are you doing on Yonge Street, for example? Well, have you seen what's going on here at the bid? Have you seen why isn't this even in there? It's like, I have no idea. We don't have any engagement. And that would have met a couple grant applications as it did in another municipality. So my concern is that there's not an openness and an engagement practice. And if we do have several weeks or months, then we certainly have enough time to bring it to council. We have a process that says we're going to arbitrarily choose that as time sensitive and it's not clearly defined. And I would encourage that to at least be brought forward to the mayor, for the mayor to contemplate if a special council meeting is needed. That would be my preference as an audit, because then it becomes completely arbitrary to the process or to the people involved in the process. And there may be a disconnect with what's happening on the ground and what the priorities are. And there's not really any dialogue opportunity when that happens. So again, my preference would be is not to have simply 1 or 2 or 3 parties internally move forwards on a 2-month campaign, when you could easily have a dialogue with at least a member of council, which I would prefer to be the mayor or the head of council at that point. So that's my comment on that. And I'll leave it with, the CAO and others to decide how they're going to engage going forward on that topic, and yourselves. And I hope that the mayor, and I know we're going through a mayor consideration at this time, but I really think that in terms of openness and transparency, if we want to act like a local municipality, then local issues matter. And if we're simply going to be a process orientation, then we really don't need the local focus that we have. I'm going to say that I think we're missing an ingredient as the whole concept of how we're governed. That's my comments, for discussion. I'll leave that with you and others for contemplation. But the definition of time sensitive doesn't really, to my mind, mean time sensitive, because if council has time sensitive that we have to get a report forward within 4 weeks, but staff don't need to do that. That to me is a very interesting disconnect. whereas the council has a higher accountability and transparency versus staff on a money component. So that's my only comment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Munch. I don't see any other questions or speakers, but I too share. Whoa, we lost the meeting.
No, your camera you disconnected from the meeting.
Just me? Join meetings.
My video's on. Did you guys don't see me?
Okay, so you can still hear me?
I can still hear you, sir. Yes.
Okay, so my video's
If
gone
you want to switch
for
seats
some
with me
reason. I could.
Switching
The clerk is offering that I use his camera to conclude the meeting. Or. Okay,
see
there we
you.
are. So.
You look good.
Okay, so we have to adapt to technology, and we're just about nearing the end of our scheduled business. Anyways, I don't see any other. Oh, Councillor Chan, did you have questions for Ms. Lee?
Yes, I do, Mr. Chair. Yes, we are adapting the new technology. I wasn't thinking about what Councillor Munch just brought up, which are valid points. So before I actually get to my own questions, perhaps I will ask through you, Mr. Chair, to staff. If I understand it correctly, I believe that staff usually maybe during the capital project or budget time will come with a list of projects that perhaps may be shovel ready, provided maybe there's opportunity to get grants. So these are the list of projects. So I understand where Councillor Munch is coming from. I share some of his concern for however, I do think that council members are not really operating a vacuum. We do have prior knowledge insofar as what are the list of projects that maybe should the opportunities for grant arises, then staff will have to jump to it within 2 weeks or whatever to make application. Is that correct, for Mr. Chair?
Yeah, I think that is correct, Councillor Chan. Ms. Dempster?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. That is correct for the most part. We do, from a capital perspective, capital programming, we look at our 5-10-year plans and we determine what would be next on the list. And we use what would be next on the list the next year, the following year, and we put a budget together to make those projects shovel ready in anticipation that there may be a grant come forward that would be applicable to those. Because I hear what Councillor Munch is saying with wanting to be involved in the decision making. You are boots on the ground, but there's a lot of parameters sometimes around these grants and timing. We don't get a lot of time to turn them around. It could be a month, but there's 2 to 3 weeks internally that we need to assess the application, to prepare the application, and to discuss with all of the groups which project would be the most successful, which project fits the definitions, and which project may be the most successful in obtaining money. And on top of that, what you may not see is we are always looking for grant opportunities. And there could be grants out there that may not fit with one of our shovel-ready projects, but we may be able to meet the timelines. There may be a project out there that we could meet the timelines with. So we want to be able to put those forward too. But I respect and hear what both Councillor Munch and yourself have said, Councillor Chan, and we will look to be more inclusive in this process.
Thank you for the answer. I think it's important not only for committee members, but also for the public to know that, in fact, there are a list of shovel-ready projects that staff have prepared and identified. So when grant opportunity arises, it might be one of those projects and not necessarily some project never been heard by anyone. I hope that is the correct interpretation. So now turn to my own questions. And I appreciate what staff have done, and I like the policy that the draft, along with all those decision trees and also where the dollar value is. My focus is on both I believe, page 8 of the report on the policy, as well as maybe the slide number 6 of Ms. Lee's presentation. My concern is more on the existing project. And in particular, depending on how you look at it, you can look at the dollar value, which the city manager have approval authority up to $250,000. That's $250,000. That's a lot of money for an existing project. My confusion there and the need clarification on the policy or draft policy, I would say, I believe on page 8, it did say at the bottom, amendments to procurement purchase awards may only be made to fixed price contracts. Now, it's interesting, at the very end of that statement or paragraph, say provided additional funding is not required. So I'm curious, on one hand, we're making adjustment to fixed price contract. On the other hand, we are allowing to have, this, well, I won't call it discretionary, but approval for extra money for existing project up to 25%. But then how's that reconciled? We provide no additional funding is required. So, Mr. Chair, either to Ms. Lee or someone who can help me understand. It seems to be something seems to be not really aligned together, in my mind anyway.
Okay, Ms. Lee or Ms. Dempster?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm not, if Ms. Lee has the answer, if she doesn't, I was going to recommend maybe our treasurer, David Dexter, who's responsible for procurement as well, may be better equipped to answer this question, but I'll leave that with Ms. Lee.
Thank you. Yeah, yes, I would defer that to our treasurer, Mr. Dexter.
Okay, Mr. Dexter. Did you understand the question there? Yeah.
I do. Councillor Chan's indicated that appears to be a bit of a contradiction between allowing up to 250 more, but then if it's a fixed price contract and there's not enough budget, then how can we go ahead with this? So what we're running into here is a situation where we're trying to create some flexibilities with this policy so that we don't have to send contractors offsite and the greater costliness of that when something unforeseen happens. But we do also have a procurement bylaw, and it requires that no adjustments be made to a PO or PR if there's not sufficient budget. So what the report's indicating is that as long as we're not in paraphrasing, as long as we're not breaking the procurement bylaw and the financial control bylaw, we can go ahead. I hope that helps.
Okay, thank you. I guess treasurer responds to that. It helps to clarify somewhat. However, I'm still conceptually thinking that if a fixed price contract is a fixed price contract, so I can understand perhaps the provision or the contractual agreement might have something to say about the change of scope of work. And based on my, I guess, knowledge and experience in this area, that seems to could potentially be controversial, depending on interpretation of the scope of work and to what extent the scope of work becomes actually like almost a new kind of work order. So it could start explaining to me again, is the 25% is the threshold that also commonly used by other municipalities as is being shown in the draft policy. So, Mr. Chair.
Through the chair to the councillor, Councillor Chen, that is correct. Through our municipal benchmarking, we did look at the various municipalities, and 25% and $250,000 is actually at the lower end of what we see. So we felt that is a good threshold to use because it is a more conservative number.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay. I do see that it's benchmarking. So that it's not just our team of staff here just picking a number. So I take comfort with that. However, I just want to say that from my end, I do see potential of that particular with existing project, it could possibly have to be really watched very carefully so that it doesn't get into kind of, number one, it's like evergreening, for those of you familiar term, meaning that it's almost like keep repeating and repeating or extending, or expanding school work, but then it loses the spirit of, competitiveness. And that's why I just want to leave those comments for consideration. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for me to ask question and make my comments. Thank you. I believe Mr. Munch, Councillor Munch may have moved the motion. No?
No, and it's just you and I here as voting members on this committee, Councillor Chan. So I need to rely on you. Oh, Councillor Munch I'm sorry, Councillor Munch, you are a sitting member of this as well. So you move the motion. Perfect. Okay. I just had a couple of comments, and I do share some of the concerns that Councillor Munch mentioned. I think the threshold does seem a little high, but I have a question, I guess, to our city manager. Just that the motion here is for this policy for the city of Richmond Hill to be approved. Not that we receive it, or not that we recommend that council approve this policy. That is this audit committee have the authority to approve and enact a new policy like this?
Mr. Chair, yes, I believe this committee has the authority to approve a policy like this. The minutes of this committee will go to council for final approval, but this committee can approve this direction.
Okay, well, there's always the opportunity to have this discussion with fuller council when the minutes come forward from this meeting. But the threshold does seem a little high when you're talking about overruns for a project. If a project goes, 200,000, I just, what would give me confidence is an assurance, and I need nothing more than Ms. Dempster, of you assuring council that if you're $200,000 over on a project, even though you're authorized to absorb that and go ahead and make a decision without coming to council, that council would be thoroughly informed in the cases where capital projects are running that much over budget. Or maybe it's the case we never run over budget. So
I believe we understand the intent. We can ensure, if it's not already built in to the process, to notify council of these projects. But I do believe, I'd ask the treasurer to confirm, but I do believe that any overruns, when we close out the capital programs, council is made aware of all this information and how funding is applied, but I'd ask our treasurer to confirm that.
I did see the treasurer's hand up, and maybe that's what he wanted to add.
Yep. To committee, through you, Mr. Acting Mayor. I guess 250 seems like a lot, but when you talk about construction projects, it really isn't a lot when something comes up, and the cost would be so much greater if the contractors have to leave the site and come back, as opposed for the time it takes to write individual reports. We, as Ms. Lee has indicated, will come annually with a report as a part of our regular annual capital status report, indicating every situation where this policy has been applied in every project and the reasons why. It'll be fully transparent, and council can see this, and it'll be a part of those presentations.
Regardless of the dollar amounts.
Right down to all the way down to $1 being over. It will be, that's a part of that report.
Okay. That helps. I'm satisfied with that then, and I just just emphasize that the communication needs to be there. So council, not only yearly, but if there are any major overruns or that we just be brought into the loop. So with that, we've got a motion on the floor from Councillor Munch. All in favor of approving this policy?
I
Councilor Munch, you saying yes? Or did you want to speak again?
Yes, yes, no, yes, yes.
Yeah,
First,
okay. So that carries, okay, and thank you very much. Thank you to everyone here. All I need now is a motion to adjourn. Thank you, Councilor
Here,
Chan. Okay, any discussion? All in favor?
I,
My hand is up. You just can't see it. There we- Okay. Then this audit committee meeting stands adjourned. Great to see you all, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow morning for council.
that